So today we will be looking at elements and principles of design and the role that they play in the human computer interaction. So before we go on to the actual elements and discuss those in their their attributes in detail, so we have to understand that as human beings we are always perceiving things around us. So since the time we were a little child, we have seen objects around us, how people behave around us, and then we perceive things like we pick up good habits, for example, from our surroundings, and our five senses, which are the sight, smell, taste, touch. So these senses, they allow us to capture this information and perceive this information. So we are always learning from our environment, and that is why nowadays researchers are saying that toddlers should play with clay, they should play with soil, because the hand eye coordination that improves. So there are so many other theories which also talk about how this perception is very important. So another example is that when we pick up an old carton of milk and we smell it, so that smell that we feel is bad, we are not taught that it's a bad smell, but over time we perceive that it is a bad smell. So there are several examples of how perception plays a very important role, and it plays a very significant role when it comes to the interface where the humans are interacting with. And so a couple of other things that are relevant in this area are also that there is a syntax, there is an order in which the elements are to be organized or arranged, because we are trying to establish connections, we're trying to understand how relevant things are. So for example, if we ask someone to draw a chair, so they will draw a flat plane with four legs, and so that is a stool, and then they will add a backrest, so that will become a chair. So it can be a simple line drawing. So that is how we have simplified when we say chair. And of course chair could have many different ways in which the legs are attached to it, but in our brain the easiest way to process the chair is with four legs and a backrest. So now syntax is how the elements are organized. So if we see a sentence in the language domain, the syntax will be how we add the words to make a meaningful sentence. So if I say going to I am market, so this sentence will not, of course one may be able to understand what I am trying to communicate because we're familiar with these words, but this order in which I have spoken out these words is incorrect order. I should be saying I am going to the market. So similarly in design also we have a certain syntax that has to be followed, a certain order in which the elements, when they are placed, they will make a lot more sense, it will be very meaningful, and also that will lead to reduced cognition load and many other things that we have already discussed in the previous lectures, how to make it more efficient, more understandable, more intuitive. So all of those features can be enhanced when the syntax is correct. Another important aspect here is also of semiotics. So semiotics is the theory of symbols. And now here, when we say, for example, language, so language is not just about words. So language, we will have symbols, we will have signs, we will have music, we will have several other elements as well, which when combined makes a language. So now when we are combining this semiotics with our syntax, so now it will form a meaningful representation where there is an order in the elements that are in front of us. So keeping that in mind, we will be looking at now the elements that are going to be used, that we'll be working with. So now the fundamental elements of design are, as we can see, point, line, shape, form, texture. But before all of these, before even the point, an important aspect is that of the image area or the picture plane, the area in which we will be actually applying these elements, we will putting these elements and then forming our the syntax we spoke about or the meaning that we spoke about. So now if I have, say for example, a square picture plane or image area, now all our sides, they are equal, and the space in which the eye movement can happen is the vertical and the horizontal, and we know that the horizontal and vertical, they are both are equal. So now there is no room for eye to expand any further, and for that reason this square picture plane becomes a static picture plane, because here eye movement is restricted in the vertical, horizontal, and also if you see diagonal, so even the diagonals are, this diagonal is equal to this diagonal. So now the eye movement is sort of static in terms of the boundary that is presented to us by the square picture plane. In contrast to this, if we take say a rectangular picture plane, so here now this length is different from the width, there is a difference there, and the diagonals are also, as opposed to the square picture plane, the diagonals are also of a different dimension other than the vertical and the horizontal length. So now if we see this picture plane, so there is more movement of the eye, especially in the horizontal direction, because horizontal direction is offering more space for the eye to move in. Now if you look back at your screens that you're used to, so maybe you can just think of whether you have a square phone, whether you have a square computer screen or a square tablet, or whether it is rectangular. So now the shape of the picture plane itself changes the whole dynamic of once we start placing the elements in this plane. Now, if I go back to the square one more time, another important thing to keep in mind is that when we are talking about the square picture plane, so right now this picture plane is vacant, it is empty. Okay, so there is no direction in which the eye will look in, because we already seen that the vertical and horizontal is the same dimension, so it's a static plane. And right now there is nowhere that the eye will be looking at, because there is no focus point or any point of interest for the eye to look at. So the minute I add a point here, so now suddenly there is a point of interest that has been generated, and now the eye will move to this point, and you will notice that the eye will mostly keep on focusing on this point itself, because again it's a static plane and the eye movement is restricted. But looking at the point, that point's quality, it could be a point, it could be any form, but we are considering it as a point here. And now the minute we add a point to the picture plane, so there is suddenly a life that has come over. So it was a lifeless square, and now suddenly there is a point of interest somewhere where the eye can look at, eye can focus on. And if you also notice that in this square picture plane, this particular point where I have put it exactly, you will probably think that this is an error, because this point is not in the center. So the point should have ideally been somewhere maybe here, but I put it off center. So when we are dealing with a square picture plane, a small error like this, of course it appears to be an error, although it was a deliberate action from my side, but then somebody who doesn't know that may consider that to be a manual error, that by mistake this point has sort of moved from the center, because intuitively in a square picture plane we will look at the center, we will be focused on the center of it. So in a square picture plane it becomes very important that whatever elements we are adding, so they have to have that deliberate movement, so it appears that there was an intention when the element was added, rather than it appear to be a mistake or a manual error. So that is something that needs to be kept in mind. The other thing is that when we're talking about the square picture plane and the point, so in a square picture plane, now if we divide this into say different quadrants, maybe these 4 quadrants, and then I, for example, further divide, I take some center point, and then I figure out that this point at the intersection is where I want to place my element. So now it is sort of logically I've arrived at where do I place my point or my element, so that the focus of the viewer is drawn to this particular point. So this is important. Why I am talking a lot about this point is because it will probably not be a point finally, but this teaches us, or this helps us understand that how the eye of the user or the viewer has to be guided. uh, what, you know, elements can we use, how can we use them, the relationship between them, so that we are able to take the user's eye the way we want them to perceive the space. So if you see a physical product or a digital product, or say artwork, or say some piece of graphic, now all of those products, all of those items have a certain way in which the elements have been placed so that the user's eye is moving along them. Even if a painting that you see in a museum or in an art gallery, so there also the focal point of the painting will be where the viewer's eye is to go at first, and then there will be a movement around the rest of the artwork where the viewer will take the other points of interest also. So we can think of it also like maybe a, you know, an art gallery where the art curator curates the gallery. So they arrange the items, all the paintings in the gallery in such a way that a viewer who is entering the gallery should be able to experience all of those art pieces, and they organize them in such a way that there is a story that is being told by the arrangement of those individual paintings. Those individual paintings may be very different by themselves. Another example of it, we can think of it from our daily life, is that of when we visit a mall, for example. And if you have ever observed that how the escalators are placed in the mall, so it is not a very easy, you know, climb from one floor to the other. Sometimes we have to take a long walk, and then we will get the escalator to go to the next floor. And the reason for that is that the architect, the design team wants the visitors to window shop all the shops that are there on that particular floor. Because if the escalator will be very easily placed next to the other escalator, so what will happen is that people may skip that floor, they will not go around the shops, and the shops will lose their business. So this is one way of showcasing all the work. And also sometimes people may not know that they want something, but when they are walking around the mall, so then they may identify that this is something I want to purchase. Of course, there are lifts also, because we need to be mindful for people who are using wheelchairs or elderly who want to just go to a particular floor quickly. But the escalators are very strategically placed, and the next time you are in the mall, I suggest you take a look at how these are placed so you can understand that. So, similarly to these architectural examples, in the area of product design, also in the area of human computer interaction as well, there is a certain path or a certain way in which we want the user to move around the particular page, whether it is a website page, or it is a mixer grinder, or it's a brochure. So there is certain way, a path in which we want them to follow. So that is why this focal point becomes very important, because this is generally where the eye will focus first, and from there it will journey around the rest of the information. So coming to the next element, which is a line, which is essentially a number of points put together, and line can be in many different styles. Line can be, you know, thin, thick, short, long, straight, horizontal, vertical, diagonal, wavy, curvilinear, and all these lines, the way they are depicted, so they have their own significance. So if I place this pen, for example, horizontally, so this will appear to be very relaxed. It is in a very relaxed, comfortable position. But the minute I make it stand upright, it now seems to have some potential energy. So, and when I make a diagonal line, so it will have some dynamic energy. So wherein diagonally something may fall also. It may fall if it is not balanced. So for example, when we see those ice skaters skating in that rink, and their body is diagonal because they're also pushing their body forward, and then they can, so we feel that they may just slip and fall because their body is leaning at very odd angles, but still they maintain their balance. So the diagonal line always shows movement and dynamism, and the curvilinear lines or lines with curvature, so they are more relaxed lines. So they show, softness, they show, some lines can show laziness. So now, for example, I'll just draw two lines, and both are made of similar elements, but they, when they're put together, so the meaning that they form is totally different. So one line is this, and the other is this. So these curved lines, the minute they have the concavity upwards, like in this particular case here, so this shows instability, and when these are the other way around like this, so they show stability. So there are many different ways in which these lines can be interpreted, and so we have like spirals as well, we have lines that, so when we see this line, this is a very, soft line which is, with very graceful curves, so it also shows gracefulness, right? Then next we have shapes. So shapes are essentially closed lines. So here we can see that the closed lines form the shape, and form is also similar. The difference is that form is more three dimensional and shape is two dimensional. But when we're talking about, a 2D plane, say website, and there how can we come up with a 3D looking form with the elements that we have. So like here we can see a cube, although it is a screen in front of you. So how can we put these lines together to depict a 3D form on a 2D plane? So that is another way of how these lines can be used. Now texture is the appearance of the surface material, and now texture can be rough, it can be smooth, and this texture can also change the way we see the visual weight of an item. So one weight is the physical weight that we see, so we can see one person is heavier than the other person, but the visual weight is when we have the same, for example, same or maybe same two squares, so which one will have a more visual weight? So if one of them has more texture or is darker, it's black in color, so it will appear heavier. So texture is very important to depict that visual weight when we are dealing with the two-dimensional plane. Then next is the color and value. So the color is also called as hue, which is the correct term for calling it hue, and this is how the basically the eye perceives the reflected light. So color is also important. And now there are the color wheel. So we have several different color theories, so we will be studying those later on. So wherein there is the Oswald theory and the several other theories where how they have organized these colors together so that it becomes more useful. And so for now we can just look at that color. The primary colors are the yellow, red and blue, and when these are mixed, so when we mix yellow and blue we get green, when we mix yellow and red we get orange, and so on. And when those secondary colors are mixed we get tertiary colors. Okay, then the next aspect of color here is also the value. So here we can see in this diagram here how this is the hue. If this part of the diagram here we see the hue, we can see how the value is changing of this color. So it is the darkness or lightness of a color, and this is also a design element. And the other is also saturation, it is also property of color. So it is the intensity of the color, how intense is the color, that is saturation. And finally we have the space. So space is the space around our elements and also the negative space. So oftentimes we do ignore the negative space, but that is also very relevant space, because how the negative space is encompassing the main elements and what is happening in that negative space also becomes important, because it also affects the main object as well. So here we can see this in this example, that these 4 blue squares we see, and then this is the negative space, the white space that is between the 4 squares. This is a negative space, and we can see that how it is forming a cross. So now, depending on how the sizes of these blue squares change, they become small or bigger, or they come closer or further apart. So that will also impact the negative space, and the negative space, the dimensions will change. And right now we are looking at it as a cross, but we may perceive it differently if the squares were organized or arranged in a different manner. But it's important that the negative space is also taken into consideration when we are placing our elements on our space. Now, coming to the design principles. So, these principles are these guiding principles, or we can see some theories which help us organize these elements that we have seen on to our area in which we are working. So, I'll call it a picture plane or image area. So, where we are working, how can we apply those elements so that there is unity and harmony in our picture plane. So, some of the basic fundamental design principles are here, these 9 here. So, the first is balance. Now, one balance is that the physical balance that we see. So, we are weighing, for example, newspapers and with a weight. So, we see that the weight is smaller, it's denser, but newspapers are more, but the scales are balanced. So, that is a physical weight. Also, if we balance the newspapers, so both will be equal, that is also physical weight. But visual balance is when two sides may or may not be equal, just as a physical balance, but still how do we get that visual balance? How can we add that into our image area? So here we can see that this is the horizontal symmetry. So symmetry is when the either sides, if we draw a line from the center, both the sides are exactly the same, or they are a copy of the each other. Now here in the horizontal symmetry, you can see that if we cut a line horizontally, if I draw a line across, so the upper part and the lower part will both be exactly symmetrical. So when we see the approximate horizontal symmetry, here we can see that the on the left we have a long rectangle. On the right side, we see that the rectangle has been broken into 2 smaller parts. So even though they are not exactly the same, it's not a symmetrical rectangle which is repeated on the other side, but still the visually the weight of the left is balanced with the right. So this is the approximate symmetry. Then radial symmetry is where we can see that it radiating from the center. So these circles, these rings that are forming. And the asymmetric or informal balance is where the unlike the symmetrical balance which we saw on the left. So here we have very different forms. So we can see here we have circles and here we have a square, but the placement of these, now if we see this particular overlap of these two circles, we can see that because of the overlap, this particular portion has become quite a focal point, because the color has become darker because of the overlap and there is more action happening here. So the focus of the eye is towards the lower part of this horizontal line. So if we were to place something again at the bottom here, then this would make the lower part very heavy, because it's already heavy because of these two big circles. So now in order to balance that, this small square on the top is balancing this action that is happening here at this area of the picture plane. So this is the asymmetrical informal balance. Now next is the contrast. So generally a contrast is the difference between two or more objects in a design, and now this difference could be lightness or darkness, something being small and something being larger, or also bright and dull. So here the contrast is more associated with the readability, the legibility, and the accessibility. So if we see this diagram on the left, the contrast in shape. So if we have, for example, in our picture plane, we have a lot of these circles, and somewhere we have this one shape. So of course the focus will go on to this contrasting shape that we have among the other similar looking shapes. So that is how contrast can be very important for when we are designing our page. Also contrast in color is there. So we can see the monochromatic color and the darker and lighter color, and contrast in scale. So here we can see that how the scale is changing. It has become from large to smaller and smaller further, and contrast in layout. So here on the top we can see that the layout is, in this part we can see layout is very balanced. It's like a grid pattern, but in this particular section the grid has been disturbed. So at the same time we can see that how the lower grid has more dynamic activity there, because our eye is moving around the different smaller squares because they are not in the positions that we sort of assume they would be in. Because in the top here the grid is very easy to understand, one quick glance and we understand it, but here the eye has to struggle a bit. So on one hand it is adding interest also, because they are not, just placed in their spaces just like the grid on top. On the other hand, it may make the readability a little bit more challenging. So depending on where we are applying this, so that will change the whole perception of that particular page. So the next principle is principle of emphasis, and now emphasis we can create with the help of weight, size, color, position, shape, style. So all of those attributes can help us create emphasis. Now emphasis is emphasizing something, so giving something focus, giving something more attention, or putting something under spotlight. So that is the meaning of emphasis. Sometimes it is also known as dominance. So this is the principle of dominance, something which is dominating. So it is the same principle. Now we have seen contrast and now we are looking at emphasis. So there may be some confusion between these two because these two are quite similar in certain terms. So now where contrast deals with the difference between the two objects, so that where we saw earlier, if you recall, that one was circle and the other was this particular shape. So now in these two the contrast was the shape, but in the emphasis it deals with the impact of the object. So in these diagrams here we can see that in the first on the left we can see that there are, in the picture plane there are 4 circles of different sizes and there is a small black circle. So even though the bigger circles are taking more space, they are occupying a lot of space there, but the emphasis is on the black dot. Now contrast, which we just saw, that is appears to be a similar principle, but contrast can help in emphasizing. So that is another little detail, that contrast is about the difference between the two shapes. The dominance or emphasis is about the impact of the object, but at the same time contrast can help in further emphasizing. So here we can see that how the black color is helping there. In the example below, here we can see that there is a grid of these circles and how one which has a darker border, it is more dominant or it is emphasized here. Similarly, in the other diagrams also you can see that here how with just one red line and that too in the opposite direction, it is leaning in the other direction. So it is the one which is emphasized here. And similarly in this one here as well, that when there are so many of these black arrows coming from right to left, but this yellow which is going against them, it's a big arrow, at the same time it's of a different color. So we can see that how the emphasis can be created, and just keep in mind that it is going to be the focal point. So somewhere where the eye will quickly focus. So a good example is on the left, top left, that how there are these big shapes, but the small black one is where the eye is going. So where the eye is going to go, the focal point, that is the where the emphasis is. Now movement is the principle. So it gives the ability to lead the viewer's eye around an object or an art piece. So here we can see in this diagram on the right that where these two humans are looking in one direction, so our eye is also looking at the right side because they are facing the right side. Similarly, in the diagram below that, the illustration below this one, the ducks are moving towards the left. So now we feel that we should also move towards the left. And this is also, we can also go back to the lines we were discussing, and apart from the physical lines that I was mentioning, there is also an implied line and also a psychic line. So these are other two types of lines. So I will just quickly add one little example of the implied line and the psychic line also. So psychic line is a line which is not physically there. Now if we see that these two humans are looking somewhere, so our eyes are also drawn to where they are looking at. But so for example, if they are looking at this element here, okay, now when they are looking in that direction, we will also want to follow their eyes to see what they are looking at, and then we will also look at this item here that they are looking at. So this is an example of implied line, and this is what is also happening here in this particular example, that we are looking at the right side because they are looking towards that direction. So this is how the movement is also created. So the eyes of the user will be involuntarily start looking towards the right. The other line that I mentioned was the implied line. And so for example, I'll give an example of from an architectural point of view. So now in architecture, we have this concept wherein, so for example, we are entering into this particular space, and here we see there are certain steps, there are certain gardens, and there is a waterfall here, and then there is a path leading to some other steps, and then maybe there is the ocean view here. So now this line, which is not really a line here, this line that I have drawn, this is an implied line in the way that it is guiding the person who has entered into this space. It's connecting one point to the other and sort of expanding the view of the user, giving them a different experience. So how we have broken that line, which is not existing in reality, but the elements around that line are sort of creating that line. So this is an example of implied line, and here this is an example of the psychic line, that where the line does not exist but the user's eye is forced to move in that direction. So the next principle is the principle of proportion and scale. So proportion and scale are how the proportions of an element are. So for example, there is a cat and a dog. So the proportion and scale will be in terms of when we are depicting them, for example, on a paper, then what will be the proportion of the, say, the head, the body of the cat and the dog, and the scale between the dog and the cat, because the cat will be usually smaller than the dog. So this is about the scale and proportion. And so when we are reading, for example, a blog post, or we are reading an article, so we always expect the heading to be larger than the body of the text. So the proportions will vary in that way, that the title will always be larger and the text will be smaller. And sizing of the elements can be used with different principles like emphasizing. So scaling of the elements when we want to depict on a 2D. So do we want to scale it down, scale it up? So that is the sizing of the elements that is there. The next is the rhythm and repetition. So rhythm and repetition contribute to the movement within a piece. So rhythm is the rhythmic movement or the repetition of the elements which creates the rhythm. So in, for example, in a website, the repetitive elements will create a rhythm, or they will create the movement around the page more easy, more accessible by the users. When we keep all the buttons of the same color, so they make it more visible, they make it easy to be spotted, and also they help one navigate better in the web page. So rhythm and repetition becomes important there. Then we have unity and harmony. So unity adds order and makes a piece feel like a coherent whole. So of course, all the elements that are there in our picture plane have to be united in some way. They have to have some kind of a language that is similar, and they are not like strewn around so that they don't make any sense. So for that, the unity becomes important. And harmony is important because they have to have a harmonious, relationship with each other. So when there is too much of harmony, or when there is very less of harmony in terms of, say, color, if we are taking the same color palette in the entire page and all the subsequent pages, sometimes too much of harmony can also make something very dull. And when the harmony is missing, when very different color scheme is on each page, then also the harmony is lost. So it is important to keep a balance between the harmony, and harmony can be achieved by various ways by using different components. So like color, I gave the example, is one of those which can harmonize the entire work of art or our website, or any other work, that a painting or even a product. So how harmonious the elements are, it will make it dull or it will make it too confusing. So that is important to keep in mind. And then we have the hierarchy. So hierarchy utilizes several principles like size, contrast, color, alignment, and many others, and this helps to emphasize certain characters of the design. So that becomes important. So when we see any page, whether it's a blog post or it is a shopping website, e-commerce website, so there is always a hierarchy. We know that the name will be on the top, then there will be a certain menu, and then there will be more information. So there is always a hierarchy that is there, an order in which the information is presented. So where we want the maximum attention, in newspaper also, when we are reading, we read the headings first and then we read the content if we find it is important or relevant for us. So if the heading doesn't interest us, we may not even read that piece of news further. So that is hierarchy. So coming to the Gestalt principles. So Gestalt's principles or theory, they talk about how the brain is always trying to simplify the information for itself. So we have talked earlier also that how the cognitive load is to be decreased. So the brain will always perceive things in a way that it understands it better. So if we recall that several years ago when we did not have the cell phone, so at that time we used to remember the phone numbers. So some of the important phone numbers we could recall and remember those phone numbers. But now over time, because we are getting so much dependent on technology, so we have phone, we have WhatsApp, we have all these things. So there is no need to remember any phone number. Sometimes we don't even remember our own phone number. So Gestalt principle talks about similar thing, that how the brain is trying to find the shorter way out so that the cognitive load is decreased, and how it also makes more sense of what is in front of it. So coming to the principles now, we can see here emergence, which is the central to the Gestalt's thinking, which talks about that how we perceive the world without thinking too much about understanding every small thing around us. So here we can see is the example of a panda, and a lot of these lines in the panda are missing here, but still we connect those lines, and we can see the round head of the panda. The next is the closure. So I have drawn these red lines here, which were the negative space that the circles were creating. So this is what it was originally. The next is the common principle of common region. So here we perceive elements that are in the same closed region. So here we have put these 6 dots, we have put them inside a boundary. So we are considering them to be a separate group, separate from these dots here. So this is also important when we are looking at designing our interfaces, that how do we group our elements together. So with the help of this common region principle, we can then differentiate between the elements but their functions at the same time. The next principle is continuity, or the principle of continuation. So here there are these 2 lines, and what is interesting is that although these dots and these dots are the same color, but still when the eye is looking at this particular lines, we continue to see this. Rather than break the view like that, the eye continues along this line and continues along this horizontal line. So basically what this talks about is that how we group the elements that seem to follow a continuous path. So here these dots seem to be following a continuous path. So that is why we see them in that flow here. And we do not see the broken part, we ignore how this is being broken here at this junction, we ignore that, but we follow along, which is the more natural path for the eye to continue on. Then the next principle is that of proximity. So proximity is about distance, how close or far away something is. So here we can see that when these dots are placed, these rows of dots, so the proximity is different compared to the other one. So I'll just draw another example here as well. So when we have, say, something like this, so we will maybe call it like there are 3 columns of these red dots, 3 vertical columns. But when I reverse, I say erase these lines here, dots here, and maybe I rather add few extra dots here. So now we will see them as 3 rows of red dots. So the closeness between these dots is making us see them as vertical lines or as horizontal lines. So that is the proximity. The next is of the multi-stability. So this is very interesting because we can see here that if you see this particular diagram here, you will either see this vase or you can probably see these 2 faces also here. So these 2 faces, when they are coming close together, the negative space is creating that vase. So now this is when the images are ambiguous and they present 2 or more meaningful interpretations. So here they are forming 2 interpretations, one is the face and the other is the vase. And we also experience this feeling of switching between them. So sometimes we may see that the vase is in focus and sometimes we may see that we are seeing the faces more. So these can happen, and this switching sensation is called the multi-stability. Then next is our figure and ground. So we can see here that figure and ground are when this relationship between the object and the background. So figure is something which is in the front, perceived to be the main object, and the ground is the background. So when we are vacationing and we ask somebody to take a photograph, we are standing in front of the mountains. So at that time we are the figure and the mountains in the background, so they will become the ground. So there are many other several aspects of how to achieve a better relationship between figure and ground relationship. So maybe we will take that up later. It's quite an in-depth area of study, but here we can see that the figure is the tree here and the ground. So sometimes the figure, ground and the multi-stability may be confused. So there is some overlap between the two, but these both are 2 different concepts. The next is the concept of invariance. So here the invariance principle explains how we perceive basic shapes as identical despite various transformations. So now these transformations include rotation, movement, also size, and it could be also some lighting situations may also vary. So this is crucial for recognizing faces because the eyes are essentially same. Differences are they could be little bit bigger, they could be wider, they could be closer to the nose, further apart from the nose, rotated up, rotated down. So but the eye remains, everybody has the same type of an eye. So all these features, these slight variation, despite those variations we are able to identify who it is. So if we just take this part of the face and lay out 5 6 different sections, we can still identify who is who based on these small differences. So the next principle in Gestalt's theory is the pregnance. So this is that how people will perceive and interpret complex images in the simplest forms. So although this is a logo here, but still we will see this as the circles, and we will also ignore the negative space that is being generated. We will not observe that shape which is in the negative aspect of these 5 circles. So this is how the eye is coming to the basic simplistic form, ignoring where the circles are overlapping and forming a new type of form. So that is this particular principle. The next is of similarity, that how we perceive complex visual information as groups of like things. So although here we have 3 rows of squares, but we will call this, for example, the line with blue dots, and these are line with gray dots. So we are just grouping them based on their similar attributes. Next principle is that of symmetry and order. So symmetry is when people perceive symmetrical elements as part of the unified group. So now here we can see that how the left and the right is symmetrical. We also discussed that earlier when I was talking about balance. And finally we have the common fate. So this principle refers to the human tendency to perceive visual elements moving in the same direction or in unison as a group, and the visuals may not be moving. In this particular case, the visuals may be static, but they convey the motion. So cues like maybe arrows and the rotation angle. So here we can see how the fish turned, their rotation. So all of these can show the perceived movement. So with this we come to the end of today's lecture of elements and principles of design, and I'll see you in the next class. Thank you.